Okay, everybody. Well, welcome to our shared future, and this is a workshop on legacy giving and Unitarian Universalism, and how you can help to encourage folks to leave legacy gifts to your congregations or organizations if you're here on behalf of an organization. Oh, thanks, Steve. Welcome. So we are. I'm Jay Passetti. I'm the Donor Relations Director at the Unitarian Universalist Association. Prior to receiving this title, I've been there for about 3 years. Previously, I was the Legacy Giving Officer at the UUA. So my job still encompasses legacy giving, including assisting congregations with your questions with regard to legacy giving. So this is fully part of my job. I am here as a resource to you, both in this webinar and after this webinar. Before joining the UUA, I was the executive director of a couple of different small but national charities, usually with very small staffs. I think the largest staff I ever had was 5, often bunch of part-timers and me sometimes in different parts of the country. So if you are in a congregation that sounds like that's your staff, I am very familiar with what it is like to work in that environment. So I'm well aware of the role that volunteers, including probably most of you, I haven't gone through everybody's photo to see who's here, but I have to imagine that most of you are volunteers. So thank you for your service to your congregations and for all that you do. It makes a huge, huge difference. Why are we here? Why are we talking about this? Why should you encourage legacy giving? Oftentimes, a legacy gift is going to be the largest gift that an individual is capable of making. It could very well be that the person, for really great reasons, may not be your top pledger because they just don't know the costs they're going to incur. They just don't know that they could have had a parent who lived to be 110, and they think that might happen with them as well. And yet, at the end of their life, you find out that they are leaving you a very large legacy gift. In addition, it's important to talk about this because, believe it or not, people may not think to leave your congregation in their will or as a beneficiary of an account if you don't ask. So it's kind of the old saying of, if you don't ask, the answer is no. So don't assume that people have already thought about it. It's important to ask. Also, legacy gifts strengthen the bond between an organization and an individual. It's a pretty strong, powerful thing to do, to leave a gift in your estate to somebody, whether it's a close friend, family member, or an organization. It's a really strong statement. And we'll talk a bunch about this. It can provide a time for meaningful dialogue about a gift before the gift is made, especially if the individual is going to make it a restricted gift. It's really important to have a dialogue ahead of time if that's possible, depending on what they're restricting the gift to. All right, so some of you are here probably from endowment committees, and there is, to be sure, a link between endowments and legacy giving. People support endowments most of the time because they would like their gift to last. You know, they want to make sure that this is here for the long haul. And it's important to them that their legacy of their financial assets is there for future generations. And often with the expectation that the legacy, that the endowment will mean that their contribution is invested, it grows, and it's there hopefully for perpetuity, right? That's the idea. But we like to say that legacy giving does not have to automatically 100% time mean endowment. First, your endowment committee and your legacy giving committee might, in fact, be 2 different groups of people for a variety of reasons. It's a lot of work to be the endowment committee. It's great if you have people who are interested in legacy giving who can, take that load of trying to bolster the endowment, and become the legacy giving committee. There's a lot of ways to do this, and they don't have to be the same people. Additionally, depending on the organization, the needs, there could be other long-lasting gifts that are not necessarily going into the endowment. I'm going to guess that there are folks here on this call who, like the congregation in Kennebunk, have a very old building, which is really important for a variety of reasons. You know, center of the community, and it's important and not, you know, for in multiple ways. So here in Kennebunk, legacy gifts are sometimes restricted to the endowment, and sometimes they're restricted to the foundation that actually goes into preserving the building. So that is another lasting cause that somebody might want to restrict their gifts to. So what does this mean for your congregation? It depends. It really depends. So we, you know, right, I just said that, sorry. So it really, it's really organization specific. There's no one size fits all here, but there can be other lasting purposes. What we don't recommend is that it's best for legacy gifts not to be counted on for general operating funds. That's not to say that you can never use legacy gifts for operating funds. That's fine if that's what you need to do, but budgeting that can get a little dicey unless you have a very, very, very deep legacy giving pipeline. And there's two reasons, at least. One, you can be sure that if you get a legacy gift, you're only getting it once, right? This is not going to happen again from this individual. This is one time. And the other thing is you just don't know when it's going to happen. It could be that somebody, in fact, does outlive their assets and does live to be 110. So even if you have a robust legacy giving pipeline, it's difficult to know for sure exactly how much money that's going to yield. So generally speaking, if it's possible to not budget and rely on legacy giving for general operating funds, that's better if you can do that. It's not, to be clear again, I'm not saying that you can't ever use legacy gifts for operating funds, and there are certainly times when that needs to be done. So if you have questions about endowments, the folks to contact are the UUA Treasurer's Office, and I have their contact info later in a later slide, which is treasurer@uua.org, and I do write that down later. All right. So we're going to jump right into legacy giving basics here by saying, first off, legacy gifts are usually different from immediate gifts for a number of reasons. They require planning. Yes, it's true that many immediate gifts require planning, but these often require a different kind of planning, consulting with a professional, whether it's an attorney, tax advisor, a financial advisor. It requires the kind of planning where you're kind of really looking at the big picture in a long-lasting way, and often there are important legal considerations involved. They have an impact beyond the financial. So, you know, the question of what is my legacy as a human on the earth, and how will I be remembered? Yes, that can impact our finances, but it can impact much more than that as well. So these are often spiritual questions that folks are asking, which, yes, a lot of giving, most giving is really has an important spiritual component. And I think it takes on a different aspect and meaning when one's thinking about legacy. Okay, so I see there's a question. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Is that restricted and not large can be a challenge to account for? How do you encourage use that? Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Actually, I think we'll save that for a Q&A to kind of come back to that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of this as we go through. So some of the major options are bequests, beneficiary designations, life income gifts, and then everybody's favorite topic, gifts of other types of assets, which is a very large amorphous category, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. And just so you know, I will be, at the end of this, I will be sending everybody on the roster an email with the slides from the presentation. So you don't have to be an expert at all of this, right? You do not need to be an expert, but it's great for your congregation to have a plan of how to approach all of this. And as I said earlier, we at the UUA are here to be a resource to you when you do have questions. Okay. So like immediate gifts, legacy gifts can be restricted or unrestricted. An unrestricted gift can be used for any any legitimate purpose of the organization. So you get an unrestricted gift, and it's up to the board of directors or whoever it is who has the authority at your congregation to make the decision of how that gift's going to be used, just like an immediate gift. A restricted gift is a gift that the organization has to use for purposes specified by the donor, right? So where issues can crop up with restricted gifts is where the restrictions are not possible to fulfill. So this gets a little bit to the question that Daryl was asking in the chat. Yes, if somebody leaves you $500 for a very specific project, and $500 is not even close to enough to complete that project, and perhaps that project isn't even something that you really think is important to complete, then yes, that gets tricky. So therefore, it's an issue when the donor hasn't discussed the restrictions with the institution in advance. It gets really tricky because you're then faced with a decision of whether do we accept this gift and honor the restrictions, or do we disclaim the gift? So if you are the recipient in somebody's will of a restricted gift, and it's not possible to fulfill the wishes of the person, then you do have the option to say, sorry, we can't take it. We just can't do that thing, unfortunately. So you're not stuck doing the thing. So one example would be, and this is truly hypothetical. This has not actually happened. Well, let's say you receive, a longtime beloved member dies. It's, congregation grieves that person, and then you find out a couple months later, you get the copy of the will, and you learn, wow, we were in their will for $500,000. That's incredible. This is amazing. And so you're reading through, let's say it's me, and I'm reading through, and I get there, and I'm reading the fine print, and I read that the $500,000 is to be used for the express purpose of opening an animal shelter in the unused basement of the church, because the person was a huge, huge animal lover and always thought that space downstairs could be put to better use. I'm instantly less excited about the $500,000 because this is just not really going to happen for all kinds of reasons, which we could talk about it, but I'm not going to. So what do you do? Do you take the $500,000 and open the animal shelter? Okay, I hope not. Like, probably not, right? Unless that was something that was on the drawing board for the congregation for years and years, great. But if this is a surprise out of the blue, likely you're not going to do that. In that case, you have to say no to this lovely $500,000 gift. In that case, it's much better, if possible, to know about it ahead of time and to have a conversation with the person to say, this is such a generous gift, this is amazing. Unfortunately, the likelihood that we can do this is low. And what if you were able to give $500,000, half to us for general purposes or for our endowment, and half to the animal shelter up the road that does an amazing, amazing job of helping the animals in our community, right? So that's where two things come into play. One, that conversation ahead of time, and two, the importance of having a gift acceptance policy in place. And if you do not have one, okay, so if you do not have a gift acceptance policy in place, you're not alone. A lot of congregations don't, or perhaps it's 20 years old and nobody's seen it in a long time and it needs to be dusted off. You're in good company. We have samples and we can send them to you. What are some of the vehicles for this? Bequest intentions is the first one that I mentioned. It is a very large percentage of legacy gifts. I don't have an updated statistic on this, but beneficiary, it's probably starting to go down with beneficiary designations going up a bit, but it's the lion's share of legacy gifts and most of what you are going to see in congregations. A bequest is something that's made through a will or a trust. It's revocable. I mean, it is, I say usually because it is theoretically possible to structure something that's not revocable, but for the most part, it's revocable. And what does that mean? That means I can change my mind. I've made a gift in my will, and I can revoke the will. I can say, well, change my mind. I'm gonna change all of my beneficiaries, and all of this is going to somebody else. So this type of gift is something that somebody can change their mind on. Often, as I said earlier, when we first started, it's a big gift. This could be the ultimate gift that somebody has to give to you. There is sample language available online and in the UUA materials that we can provide to you. If you are interested in receiving sample language, please just let me know. Again, the email to send is to legacy@uua.org. If I mention anything that we have samples of, like gift acceptance policies or sample request language, just let me know at legacy@uua.org. And early next week, I will send you the materials you've asked for. So who do we leave in our wills? Often our very close friends, our family, things and people, places and people who mean a great deal to us. So if somebody has left you in their will, they are saying, you, First Parish of Kennebunk, Maine, insert your congregation here, our family, you are my family now. So this is a really powerful bond, again, that's been created. So when giving a bequest, it's often useful for everybody involved for that to be a percentage of an estate or of the remainder of an estate. It's easy math for somebody to do. Okay, I have 100% to give away. How much would I like to give to First Parish in Kennebunk? As opposed to trying to figure out in advance how much might be left, how much is that going to be? I mean, sometimes people know that there's a fixed dollar amount, but 5% could in fact turn out to be more than $5,000. Maybe they have $200,000 when they die instead of $100,000, and that 5% is $10,000. So if somebody doesn't have a particular amount already really fixed in their mind, encouraging them to make it easy on themselves and figure out a percentage is useful. Okay, so I more or less just said that. They may not want to try to figure out a fixed amount in advance, and it's more comfortable and easier for them to figure out percentages among family, friends, and charities. That 5%, as I said, could end up being a larger bequest. All right, so beneficiary designation. So that was a little bit about bequest. It's will, trust, and we can provide sample language. We do recommend that you make the sample language easy to find because you never know when someone's going to actually go to their attorney. Beneficiary designations is where somebody can designate a beneficiary, and I'm going to guess a lot of you have seen this type of form before. Retirement assets, commercial annuities, life insurance, some, not all, but some types of bank accounts. You get a form from the financial institution. It says name, or it's either online or a piece of paper. It says name your beneficiaries. You can name charities, including congregations, as the beneficiaries on all of these kinds of assets. This is very easy, does not involve an attorney. Somebody can do it pretty quickly. So that's why, while I don't have exact figures, I think that this is probably is why bequests is probably less than 80 to 90%, because a lot of those gifts are now coming through beneficiary designations. This is usually a percentage. I have seen it done where somebody has attached an addendum to a form from a financial institution specifying a specific amount to go to a particular beneficiary, but that's definitely not the majority, and the financial institution would have to agree to let the person do that, right? So normally it's a percentage of whatever the account is. A congregation can be named as a primary or a contingent beneficiary on these accounts. So 100% to my spouse, and if heaven forfend we are both incinerated by a meteorite, which I know is not going to happen, then everything 50% to First Parish in Kennebunk and 50% to the UUA, right? That is a possibility. Or 100% to my kids, and contingencies to other people and charities. So you get the idea. Beneficiary designations, like I said, are created using a form from the financial institution. I'm going to say this really briefly. I'm not going to go into the weeds here at all. If you have retirement assets, if I have $10,000 in retirement assets, and I have $10,000 in a bank account, if my retirement assets, like let's say it's an IRA and it's pre-tax dollars, if my intention is to live 50% of my money to my spouse and 50% to charity, if I leave the 50% in my, if I've got 10,000 in each account, if I leave the IRA account to charity, there is no tax. If I leave the IRA in the bank account to my spouse, then my spouse pays no tax because it's after-tax dollars in my bank account, and the charity pays no tax because they're not going to pay charity on my IRA because they don't pay tax. It's just a very brief mention that sitting down with a financial advisor to figure out which assets should go where, if you do have a charity in the mix, it's a good idea. And it gets, there's a lot of detail to consider in there. I'm just making a very brief mention on purpose so that you know that this is a thing. I will at this juncture also say that when you're talking to folks, my role is not to give somebody tax advice ever, or to give them legal advice. I am giving them information to give them as much information as I responsibly can, but I am not advising them. I can give them examples, but I'm not representing them because frankly, I'm talking on behalf of my role at the UUA, and you are going to, if you're talking to folks in your congregation about leaving assets, you're speaking on behalf of your congregation, right? So just remember that you're there to give examples and information, but you're not actually giving them advice. Another thing to keep in mind is that donors, you have to look at the overall plan. You can Google and find examples where somebody accidentally disinherited everybody through beneficiary designations. Because if I designate a beneficiary on my IRA and my bank account and my savings account and an annuity, and I designate all of that stuff on those forms with the financial companies, then that's where those assets are going to go. There's not going to be anything that's actually left to be distributed in my will. So people just need to remember that they have to think of the plan as a whole when they're making these designations, so that they understand how all the pieces fit together. And again, that's a really great place for them to have a conversation with their financial advisor or their attorney. So Marcia notes that she's an estate attorney and find that very few realize how this works. And so, yes, this is really important. If somebody's talking about this, just always remember to say, hey, talk to your estate attorney. And if they don't have an estate attorney, we can, somebody remind me to talk about that in the Q&A later, please, because I don't want to kind of go down that road right now. And the other thing, somebody else put a comment in privately to me that we do also have, there is a way to have conversations with people. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but if somebody does tell you that they're left in their will, it's really a good idea to get a bequest intention form from them that describes that in some detail if they're willing to. We do have a template form that is something that I can send to you. So just something to note about, if somebody says, wow, I've left you my will. Oh, here's a form. Please tell us how that's coming to us. Is it from an IRA? Is there a restriction on it? Tell us as much as you're comfortable telling you. And hopefully, the more this culture kind of builds in your congregation, the more of this can happen. So Robin's asking about surviving spouses inheriting dead partner's assets without any tax consequences. Well, it just gets stretched out. I mean, I might be totally wrong about that, but I believe that if it's pre-tax dollars, sooner or later, when you take a distribution, you're going to have to pay taxes on it. Sooner or later, somebody needs to pay taxes. It's just not going to be estate tax consequences, right? So, and if Marcia, if I'm totally wrong about that, let me know. So we're talking about when I'm talking about taxes right then with estate, with the difference between retirement and other assets, I'm talking about income taxes. All right, thank you for that clarification. So beneficiary designations, regardless of the type of account, again, they can be revoked. So they're revocable, they can be changed. I could go to tiacraft.org right now and set the beneficiaries on my retirement account, and then 2 days from now I could change it. Say, well, no, I never really liked that sibling anyway. Let me go change that, right? So just remember that this stuff can change. And that means if somebody could change it to add your congregation, right? It's not just about revoking things to you, it's also about they can easily change their plans to add you in. All right, so that's a kind of whirlwind overview of bequests and beneficiary designations, which are the two most common things that you're going to see. Life income gifts, that's the third major category that I was going to talk about. what is that? What does that even mean? So a life income gift is a gift that is that I make today, right now, and I give my money to charity, and in return, I receive some income every year for the rest of my life. Usually for the rest of my life. Sometimes it can be for a term of years. But what we're going to talk about are for the rest of our lives. So there are three major types. And again, there's a lot. There's a lot under this category. We could really get into the weeds and some really complicated stuff, but we're not going to, because most of what you're going to experience are these types: pooled income funds, charitable remainder trusts, and charitable gift annuities. Pooled income funds, think of it kind of sort of like a mutual fund that's held by a charity. The rate of return is not fixed. So you've got this money sitting in the pooled income fund, and it generates whatever the market return is at that moment in time. They are not as popular now as they were 20 years ago, because the rate of return on them is far less than it was about 20 years ago. However, a much larger amount of money goes to charity in a pooled income fund because the principal isn't invaded. A charitable remainder trust is just that. It's a trust that it becomes a charitable entity, income to a person or persons for life, and then at the termination of the trust, what's left of the corpus goes to the charity or charities that are designated. These are for the UUA. We will accept them for $250,000 or more. Under that, it kind of doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense for somebody to put in all the work that goes into it with us to do that. So if somebody's thinking about a charitable remainder trust, they likely have enough assets and are already talking to an attorney about this. By all means, if somebody starts talking to you about one of these, give me a call, we'll talk it through. You're going to see less of those two things than a charitable gift annuity. So a charitable gift annuity, I'm going to go into some detail here. Oh, sorry. So the other thing to note is that these are gifts that are often well made from highly appreciated assets. Okay, this was really relevant in December, a little less relevant now. People might not have quite the appreciation in stock that they had back in December, right? But it's often, if somebody does have, they bought Zoom, and Zoom has doubled or a little bit more than doubled, and they'd really like to make a gift and not have capital gains tax hit them quite as hard. A charitable gift annuity can be a good way to do that. We'll talk a bit about that. These gifts are irrevocable. You cannot change them. You can't take the money back. After you make a gift to one of these three vehicles, you're done. That's it. You receive an upfront tax deduction, and the gift can't be revoked. You do, however, continue to get the income unless you say, okay, I'm done getting the income and I want the charity to get it from here on out. That is possible, but you can't take this gift back. So I'm going to go into some detail about charitable gift annuities and the program for charitable gift annuities at the UUA. So here's an example. Jane is 72. Jane says, you know what? I would like a charitable gift annuity. I really like this thing. I'm going to give $10,000. It goes to the UUA's Charitable Gift Annuity Fund, which is a completely separate fund. Jane and the UUA enter into a contract. Jane gets an upfront tax deduction. That tax deduction varies based on a number of factors, but throwing a dart at her age, it's about 50% of her upfront gift, roughly. Don't quote me on that because that's rough. And the annuity rates are set. Those are fixed, and they're fixed by age, not by gender, but by age. So because Jane's 72, her annuity rate is 5.4%, which means that every year she's going to get $540 paid to her quarterly, because that's how we pay those. When she dies, the amount of money left in the annuity is going to go to the UU entities that Jane specified as beneficiaries. With the UUA's gift annuity plan, congregations can be added as beneficiaries to those charitable gift annuity contracts. So unless Jane lives to be much older than the life expectancy charts that are used, or unless the market tanks, right? That's another thing that can happen. Then the amount that the charitable beneficiaries get will be about $5,000, roughly half of what she initially gave. So the rates are fixed by an organization called the American Council on Gift Annuities. That's what we follow for the suggested rates. And those are actuarial types who look at a number of different factors and come up with a suggested list of rates. So that 5.4% is a rate, a maximum rate that is recommended by the ACGA with the hoped for result of at least $5,000 being left. CGAs can overperform and underperform. That is up to the person's life expectancy in the market. So, and the reason it's only going to be about half is because in order to pay that fixed amount of 5.4%, principal will be invaded to achieve that. So with us, I mentioned some of this already. The minimum is currently still $10,000 right now. It can be for 1 or 2 income beneficiaries for 1 or 2 lives. You must be 65 or older to get distributions from a charitable gift annuity. You can do a deferred gift annuity starting at age 60, but you can't receive payout until 65. You can also get a deferred gift annuity at age 70 and ask to be paid starting at 75. That increases the rates a little bit. The rate of return is fixed. The rates depend on the person's age and whether there are 1 or 2 annuitants. 2 annuitants are going to lower the rate because actuarially the odds of 2 people living longer are higher than 1 person outliving those expectancy charts. The rates can range from roughly 5% to 8%, and for donors who are in their 90s, a little bit higher than that. As I mentioned earlier, for highly appreciated securities, it can be a really attractive choice. And yes, there are going to still be people out there with some highly appreciated securities that maybe they would like to stretch out their capital gains hit over time. This is a way to do that. So with the UUA, the payments are guaranteed by the UUA. We work in partnership with State Street Global Advisors in Boston to administer this program. It could be that somebody in your congregation has a charitable gift annuity. It's possible. And if they, unless it's anonymous, in which case we're not going to tell you, so unless it's anonymous, we will have sent you a letter back when they took out this charitable gift annuity, but it might have been 20 years ago, and who knows where that letter is or if it actually is on your current radar, right? So you might have one of these things and not know that benefits your congregation. So if somebody dies, let us know. I mean, I know you do this anyway, but it's just another incentive to remember to let us know when a member passes away, because what happens is Miriam, my colleague in Legacy Giving, and I get an email that says so-and-so has died. And then part of that notification shows us that they've got a gift. And then we look and say, oh, look, there's a charitable gift annuity that we need to terminate with State Street because they've now passed away. And then we can start the process of getting that money to liquidate it and send it to the beneficiaries. This is one of those times where if there is somebody, you can contact me for more information generally about this, but if there's somebody at your congregation who wants one of these, they really need to talk to Miriam or me so that we can give them a personalized illustration. So that they can take that illustration and go straight to their tax person and talk about it. We have, from time to time, worked with somebody where the congregation's treasurer really wanted to be the middle person. It's not ideal. So we ask that you put the person directly in touch with us so that we can give them the information directly so that they can talk with their advisors about whether this is in fact the gift that they want to make. If you go to our website, uualegacy.org, again, that's just uualegacy.org, and you click on Life Income Gifts, there's a charitable gift annuity calculator where you can get a quick estimate of what the benefits might be. So it's a very quick estimate. For a more full illustration, they need to contact us, but you can get an idea using this kind of slider calculator interactive thing on our website. We do ask that you encourage, if you're going to encourage folks to get involved in this charitable gift annuity program with us, we ask that you join us in asking folks to leave at least 25% to the UUA to support our work, including this program, and B, because we actually bear 100% of the risk of this program. Your congregation, if the CGA balance for the corpus goes under the initial goes below zero, we are contractually obligated to keep paying on it. You are not contractually obligated as a beneficiary, but we are. So we do ask that if you're going to promote this program, that you join in our ask to have folks help support this program. Together, this is an example of something that a congregation really doesn't, don't do this, right? You're not going to go and open a CGA program. You're not going to do that because you'd have to have a much larger pool than a congregation is going to have. So it's an example of something that together we can do what a congregation would not be able to do alone. All right, so amorphous gifts of other types of assets. So I'm going to go through this really quickly just to kind of put this in your mind as something that you could see. And if you do see it, this is a time to go ask questions. And it could be that, you're an attorney, as we have on the call, who you might be the go-to person for your congregation, right? Or maybe you're not yet sure who the go-to person is in your congregation, and you just need kind of to get a compass. I'm here to help point you in the right direction. Gifts of other types of assets could include real estate, and I do want to come back to real estate, artwork, jewelry, stock in closely held companies. These are the types of things that have their own special rules around them, whether it's a gift, a current gift, a gift today that somebody wants to make while they're still alive, or whether it's something they'd like to leave you in their will, right? So these each have their own special rules. I'm not going to get into them. I just want to make you aware that these are a thing. And back to the gift acceptance policy, it's really important, right? Somebody mentioned I believe in the chat about, or maybe it was when we were talking, what happens, so somebody comes to you, or either you find this out in their will, or somebody comes to you and says, I would really love to give the congregation some real estate. That's great. Thank you so much. We applaud your generosity. This is wonderful. Then you say, hey, could I have the address? And they give you the address. And it's the vacant lot at the edge of town that everybody has been driving past for 20 years, wondering who the heck is going to buy that thing, right? It's a gift acceptance policy puts you in a position to be able to graciously say no. Because the gift acceptance policy, what it's going to do is you're going to set out what are the general parameters for how you're going to accept varying kinds of gifts, and real estate is a good one to spell out. What are the parameters? Who are the people in the congregation? What governing body has the authority to make a decision? And you're going to basically just set out a set of rules so that you're not stuck in a situation where you're talking on a case by case basis, which we all know is not really an ideal place to be working from, right? So if you've got a policy in place, you can go to the policy and apply the policy and say, hey, this is what the policy says, and this is what you need to do. And we're so grateful for your generosity. Thank you so much, but it's just not something we're able to accept at this time according to our policy in place, right? Real estate in particular can get dicey. As was mentioned, what if it's being used for fracking? What if it was used for fracking? What are the environment, are you buying a Superfund site by accident, right? You don't want to do that. So you want a policy that A, gives your future self a framework to follow, a well thought out set of steps so they don't have to invent it from scratch. And as I said, a way that folks can look and say, okay, all right, I get it. There's a policy. This is how it's done. It's done this way every time. Okay, I'm hopefully going to be less inclined to take this personally, right? So that's why I'm a big fan of gift acceptance policies. And again, if you need some samples, just email me again at legacy@uua.org and I will send you a couple. All right. So seek advice. As I said earlier, we don't handle these transactions on behalf of congregations because there's two of us. We couldn't. And there's a lot of reasons that we don't, but we're here to assist you. If you don't already have somebody on your board or on your committee or in the congregation who you can go to who's an expert in this area, we're here to assist you in thinking it through and helping you connect with the experts you need to connect with about these types of gifts. Okay, so we're getting close to our break. I'm going to talk about qualified charitable distributions and then we're going to take a break. So a lot of you on this call probably have already heard about qualified charitable distributions. You probably have congregants who are making qualified charitable distributions to you for their pledge payments. Colloquially, this can be known as the IRA charitable rollover. I can't tell you why. I actually tried to find out why it was called that. I don't know. But the official term is a qualified charitable distribution. So this is an immediate gift that's made while somebody's alive. It's not a legacy gift, but it tends to fall in the area of sort of the catch-all of legacy giving, planned giving, because of the planning required and because of the demographic that are making them. Qualified charitable distribution is a transfer of funds from somebody's qualified IRA account to a charity. So note that I said qualified IRA account, not a 401k, not a 403b. It's got to be an IRA. So you cannot make a QCD from a 401k. Why not? I don't know. It's just the way it's just the way the codes are written. I don't know the ins and the outs of why it ended up that way. This is available only to donors age 70 and a half or older. And even though the Secure Act passed last year increased the age starting at which an RMD needed to be made, which is 72, a qualified charitable distribution is still available to donors age 70 and a half and older. If you do have somebody who's in that window, just encourage them to seek tax advice, because if there's some very technical rules about if somebody's still contributing to their IRA and making QCDs, then the amount they can contribute is different. So that's one of those times, and you say, wow, I'd really love for you to talk to your tax advisor about this, right? Just to make sure, because it's technical stuff when you get into that little window. It counts toward the donor's required minimum distribution. Many of you have probably already read and heard that for 2020, part of the CARE Act passed a couple weeks ago, suspended required minimum distributions for 2020. So nobody has a required minimum distribution this year. Some people may have already. That doesn't mean, however, that they can't still make a qualified charitable distribution, just so you know. The really cool thing about qualified charitable distributions is that it's not included in the donor's taxable income, right? So this is actually not part of their taxable income. It's just, there are very few things in the Internal Revenue Code that are not income. When I say very few, I mean extraordinarily few. So this is sort of an amazing moment where money comes to you that you can distribute to charity, and it is not income, so it won't be taxed. Because it's not included in income, therefore it's not a donation that's deductible, because it wasn't income in the first place. We actually have a separate language for those letters to acknowledge the qualified charitable distribution. That is not the same language as for deductible contributions. If you need language, sample language for your own letters, just again, email me and I will send you some template language for that. I still recommend that you run it past your tax folks, but I can show you what we use. Up to $100,000 per donor per year, again, with the potential exception of somebody in the window between 70 and a half and 72 who's still contributing, that they're their own special category. Up to $100,000 per donor per year can be given to charity, not per charity, per donor. So if I mean, this would be amazing. It's not true, but if it were amazing and I had $100,000 that I could give away, I could split that among the charities I cared about. Wow, there's a typo from last year. Okay, so because of the 2017 tax code changes, this is a very popular option. So for somebody who doesn't itemize their deductions anymore, and therefore isn't able to take advantage of keeping track to watching their donations add up, this is really popular because the money's just not income in the first place, so it's just not taxed. It's worthwhile to inform donors anytime in the year. Don't wait till the end of the year. Tell folks to speak with their tax advisors for sure. There's a lot. I could talk for another hour probably about these gifts, the mechanics, how to acknowledge the gifts. So if you're really interested in getting in the weeds, let me know. Happy to talk about it. There's a note in the chat from John about checkbooks, and he's 100% right. These checkbooks are one of these things that it's important to pay attention to, because those checks need to clear the person's IRA account before December 31st. For a lot of reasons. So it's better to not get these on the last day of the year. It's better to get them earlier in December, just to make sure all the dust settles in these accounts for folks before the year closes out. So, but yes, so you might be getting checks from people that they can write directly on their IRA, directly to your congregation without requesting that the company send the check. Another quick note about that: it's not uncommon for us at the UUA to get a check from somebody's IRA, and the IRA company doesn't put their name on it. So we then have to try to figure out, if the person didn't give us a heads up to look for this QCD check, it takes a while to try to figure out who it came from. So just an FYI. So if if you do know that people are going to give by QCD, try to get them to let you know that ahead of time, just in case you get that anonymous check. It's come from Fidelity. I don't know that Fidelity is the company. I can't remember which company, is worst about this. But if you get a check and there's no donor name on it, it's really hard to credit the person prospect. By everyone, I mean literally everyone. It's important not to be limited by our perception of somebody's means. I don't know. I don't know if anybody saw this in the newspaper. I want to say it was in the last year. I can't remember exactly when. About the guy in the Boston area who died, who left something like $7 million to his favorite charity. The guy used to duct tape his sneakers. He was so frugal. He would duct tape his sneakers back together rather than buy new sneakers, right? And so people assumed that he had nothing, when in fact, he gave a $7 million legacy gift to a charity, right? So we just never know. A congregation contacted us a couple weeks ago, didn't have a gift acceptance policy, and out of the blue, that this person had died 2 years ago, and then they were notified recently that they were receiving $120,000. Nobody knew this person had that kind of money in their retirement account. Nobody expected that. It was really just out of the blue to them. And so we had a conversation about what, the ways that they might use that gift. So you just don't know. You just don't know who it's going to be. And remember too, that this power of connection that we talked about, that this is your family, it's not about the size of the gift. So the word estate, to me, if I hear the word estate outside of the legal context, I think of rolling green verdant hills and a mansion in the background with a long driveway, possibly with gold-plated dogs at the entrance and the gates and the whole. Yeah, no, right. The estate is just whatever it is that I have at the end of my life. That's my estate. And that could be it's not going to be, but whatever, you get my point. That could be the mansion in the rolling hills, or it could be $1,000 that I really want to give to charity. That $1,000, that's my last $1,000 to give, is really meaningful to me. And at the UUA, when we get that $100 gift, that's all somebody had to give. That is every bit as valuable to us and as the larger gifts. And when we do our in memoriam presentation at General Assembly, that $100 legacy gift that came through, you bet that person's picture, assuming the family consents to giving us a picture, is in the in memoriam presentation with the person who gave a $50,000 gift. That gift is so meaningful. And if, what we like to talk about is cultivating this culture of legacy and this culture of valuing everybody's legacy, whether it's money or the volunteerism that they had, you create that culture in your congregation, and hopefully that is one of the building blocks toward having these conversations about things we don't like to talk about, right? No, I don't want to talk about money or my death. I want to talk about neither of those things, especially not in the midst of a pandemic. Thank you very much, right? No, I feel personally quite compelled to find ways to talk about that because it's pretty real right now. So, there's definitely a tension there, and that's the spiritual conversation where it's helpful if you can get your possibly not. All right, so common misperceptions that we like to talk about is, again, only wealthy people have estates. No, it's whatever's left over at the end of my life, that's my estate. only elderly people arrange legacy gifts. No, definitely not true, right? A lot of people arrange, in their wills. It could be that there's a young couple that with kids, and no, they're not going to leave you as their primary beneficiary, but maybe they'll leave the congregation as a contingent beneficiary. And then in 20 years, when they change their will and they can feel like they can afford to leave 5% to their congregation, then you go out of that contingent position to a 5% position, right? So people make estate plans at different stages in their lives. Sometimes, maybe it's when they get married, or after they have kids, or maybe after their kids go to college, or perhaps right after they retire. And at all these different stages, it's important for your congregation to be front of mind for them when they're considering where these assets are going to go. So, everybody is important to think about. Also, don't assume that just if somebody wanted to leave us in their will, they already would have done. They know they can do that. Don't assume that they know that. Maybe they never thought about it. Or maybe they thought about it, but they didn't know where to find the information. And they were like, I just got to get this done. I gotta get somebody written down in this form. I can't find it on the website. Okay, forget it. I'm just gonna, put the animal shelter because I can't find the truth. Make sure that the information is there and make sure people know that you are an option. All right, so again, everyone is a legacy giving prospect, but here are some categories in particular. Frequent donors, which is pretty much everybody who pledges to your congregation, right? There is research out there that an organization is far, far more likely to get a legacy gift from somebody who gives $50 or $100 a year than from somebody who gives a one-time gift of $5,000, right? Because that person who's been giving for years and years and years and years has a solid, stable relationship with the charity. And the same is true of your congregation. Frequent visitors. There could be people who come in and out of your congregation as a visitor who maybe they just sort of don't want to sign the book, right? But they certainly might value being there enough that they want to leave a legacy gift. Your active volunteers, surviving spouses are at a moment when they might be really trying to figure out what their estate plan is. And I'm not saying you kind of, make a list and like try to go find those people. That's not my point here. It's just that could be somebody who approaches you to find the information, or for whom you want to make sure the information is easy to find. So my spouse and I don't have children. We're totally giving, not that it's gonna be a lot, but whatever it is, a bunch of it's going to charity. So we are really important people to consider for legacy gifts. Don't forget about alumni of your congregation. Perhaps somebody has moved south or out west to be closer to family. They might still have a very close tie to your congregation. They might still be very apt to leave you a legacy gift. So, there's a lot of people with connections. There could be people in the community who would like to leave you a legacy gift because, the joke here in Kennebunk is half the town has the key to the church. I don't know if that's true anywhere else, but there are so many community groups meeting at First Parish in Kennebunk that there are a lot of people for whom that building is important because they're not going to services ever, but a group that's really important to them meets there every single week. So the pool is actually a pretty large pool of people who might be interested in supporting your community. So some ways of doing this: education sessions. Do you have an attorney maybe in your, or a tax person or a financial person who could give a no strings attached educational session? Newsletter articles and inserts. We have some of these. They're a bit dated, but we have them. They're kind of more jumping off generic language points that I can send you if you'd like. I can send you those things. Do you have information on your website? Is it easy to find? Is your sample bequest information there? And your employer identification number? Testimonials. If there are people who have arranged legacy gifts to the congregation, if they're willing to, if you already know about it and they're willing to talk about it, if they're willing to say, you know what, here's my story, here's why First Parish means so much to me, and it means so much to me that I just want to make sure that I continue my legacy here and I continue to support well into the future so that the next generation can enjoy this community the way that I enjoyed it, right? That's a very generic thing, I'm sure there are much more specific testimonials that somebody could give you. Do you have a brochure rack? I know we have a brochure rack, and yes, we have a legacy giving brochure in it. You can think of your website as your electronic brochure and your brochure rack as your, traditional brochure. Yes, people like to grab that. Oh, great, I'm going to see my lawyer in 2 weeks. I'll take this brochure. It's got the language in it, right? Then they can just give it to the lawyer and say, here's the language for me to give to First Parish. Whatever it is, make it easy to find. Creating a recognition society. I'll say up front about this that sometimes people ask us about this and say, all right, well, we are really kind of don't want to do this because we already have this feeling in our congregation that the people with money get more recognition than the people who just give their time, and I don't know, we kind of don't want to go there. First and foremost, whether you do this and how you do this is very unique to you and to your community, and whatever it is that you do needs to fit well for you, right? So these are suggestions, and you're going to do what feels right for you. The other thing I will say is, don't necessarily thank your donors less. Maybe you need to thank your volunteers more, right? So it's not a case of, oh, the donors feel like the volunteers feel like the donors get more thanks. Okay, thank the volunteers more, right? So because people do, if they're not anonymous, they do like to be recognized. And again, however, if you do choose to do this, or if you have done this, how are you using this recognition society to really cultivate that culture of legacy and show people and demonstrate that, yes, people's legacy gifts are really deeply meaningful. So it's a way for you to stay in touch with the people who you know to be legacy donors. It is a way for you to say, okay, we have this bond, you have said we are your family, and here's how we're going to strengthen that bond through this society. And society is sort of a kind of a bit of a loaded word, but through this recognition group, however you want to call it, you can ask members of the recognition group to host events. If you're just starting out and you have, that there are 4 people who've left legacy gifts and are willing to be charter members to give testimonials, that's a good place to do it, sort of, the peer example. One idea that I like a lot is if you are in a position to create an oral history project, do that. I mean, we have a member in Kennebunk who's been a member for, I believe, 51 years. She's seen an incredible amount of change over those 51, maybe it's 52 years in the congregation. And, I know there's some oral history from her. I'm sure we could benefit from more. Link up with youth. If it's something that your youth program has bandwidth to do, linking up those younger members of the congregation, younger folks in the congregation with the elders, and have the youth perhaps engage in that oral history project is just an idea if that's something that would work well. Okay. So how can the UUA help? I've talked throughout a little bits and pieces about things that we can offer. Material for brochures and flyers. Happy to send you whatever it is that we have. Gift acceptance policy samples. We have a legacy giving guide for congregations, which is a written version of a lot of what I've already talked about here today. The website uualegacy.org. Has some sample stories of giving would look like. Well, there are actual stories of giving, actually, but that gives you an idea of what stories of giving can look like. There's an online gift calculator for charitable gift annuities. Again, that is just to give you an idea. That doesn't take the place of a full illustration that somebody would bring to a tax advisor or financial advisor. There's information about the giving vehicles I've talked about. Another thing, and a lot of you are probably on this list already, it's an old school listserv. So UUA.org, UU Money is the name of the listserv. So if you want to be in touch with other other folks who are in leadership positions, then then you want to potentially be on this listserv. People talk about anything regarding money in congregations. Recently, there was quite a lot of information being shared about the Paycheck Protection Program, right? So it can be anything from legacy giving all the way to church software, financial software. It's a very helpful resource in many ways. You can search the archives, and if you don't find your answer, you can put a new question out. You can email us. I've given you this website before, legacy@uua.org. For endowment resources, we direct you to treasurer@uua.org. I can start the conversation with you, but that is not my area of expertise. This presentation, and again, I'll send out these slides so you can find this on our website, on the UUA's website. Back in 2016, Reverend Laura Randall and the then treasurer and CFO of the UUA gave, at GA 2016, they gave a presentation on covering a lot of what I'm talking about today is what Laura was talking about, and Tim talked in some depth about endowments, and that information is as relevant today as it was in 2016. So that's a really great tool if you'd like to dive in a little bit more about endowments. You can call us to talk about approaching potential gifts. Again, I can act as sort of a waypointer for the more complicated questions that might arise. How you might want to talk with donors about benefits and differences from different types of gifts. Umbrella, I'll talk a bit about umbrella giving. If you are not aware of this, through umbrella giving, it allows somebody to simplify their estate plan. So some of you may already be familiar with this. If you have, and that's the Beagle speaking, sorry. This is a way that the UUA can help your congregation accept gifts. So it allows somebody to be completely anonymous, but basically what somebody can do is leave, let's say I leave $10,000 to the UUA, and then I send a memo, a memorandum of intent, sorry, that says, dear UUA, I'm leaving you $10,000 through my will or beneficiary designation or whatever it is. I would like you to send $2,000 to First Parish Kennebunk, $2,000 to Murray Grove Camping Conference Center, $2,000 to my former congregation in Beverly, Massachusetts, and the remainder of the gift is for the UUA's general purposes. So you make one gift, the UUA does the work of collecting the gift, but the other organizations collect a check. So if you know of somebody who would like to make multiple gifts that include the UUA and other UU entities, this is a great way to give the work to the UUA, frankly, and for the other organizations to then just get a check. So if somebody's got an estate, a thought of estate planning like that, and includes the UUA and others, this is a good option. They can get in touch with me or with Miriam for more information. And if somebody really, 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 really wants to be anonymous, this is another good way to do it. Because if they say we're anonymous, I don't care how many times you ask me, I'm not going to tell you who it was. That's actually happened. Like, no, really, can't you? I'm sure they would have wanted us to know. No, they didn't. And no, I'm not going to tell you, but good try. So that is a way to preserve somebody's anonymity. This program is also what gives access to the charitable gift annuities that we talked about, as well as pooled income funds and stock gifts. So if your congregation doesn't have a brokerage account and somebody would like to give you a gift of stock, they can do it through the UUA, through my colleague, Tom Klein. And if you need a link to that information, just let me know. I'm happy to send you a link to the page with the information. And then, as I said, my colleague, Tom, handles those. And it's the same thing. The UUA processes the stock gift and then sends a check to the congregation. This program is supported by donations, by your annual program fund contributions, by legacy gifts to the UUA. So we do ask those. If someone's going to use umbrella giving, it's really best if the UUA is actually one of the beneficiaries ultimately of that gift.